Welcome to Roma to Sonoma, where we bridge the gap between the New World and the Old World wine regions. I'm Lane. I'm a wine journalist based in Sonoma.
And I'm Pia. I'm based here in Rome, and we are talking today about one issue that a lot of people seem to have on their minds, especially wine lovers, which is Cabernet Sauvignon dead? What is happening there? And obviously, Lane, you being based where you are in California, know a lot about Cabernet Sauvignon, I think,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, that's basically Napa's bread and butter and has been for many decades. Cab is king is sort of the mantra. And I think, the issue is that sales in wine are down pretty much across the board. They have been. I think, let's see,
Right.
it's like 7% since 2019. So, which might not sound like a lot, but that's a huge jump down.
Yeah.
And particularly, one thing that is very interesting is that while red wine sales have dropped, white wine sales have sort of started to rise and sparkling as well. So it's, I want to say it was like in the US market, well, all wines dropped by like 5% in 2024. 5%, all wines. But the white wines and sparkling seem to be holding stronger. So it's an interesting concept. It's like, okay, so while wine is down across the board, lighter wines are gaining. And so what is that
Totally.
about and why? What do you
So
think?
I think there's a lot about kind of like it's not just about production. There's a lot about like trends in wine consumption, right? So I feel like not only are people going for something that's more kind of light, like sparkling, like white wines, but also even in terms of reds, you have this kind of shift towards lighter bodied reds. You and I have talked about this before in different episodes and stuff as well, but like Pinot Noir, Gamay, Beaujolais is having a real moment right now. I'm telling you,
Oh,
in
oh,
London, it's so funny. Like everyone is talking about Beaujolais. In fact, the prices are going up again, and the price had really plummeted from when they
I
had that
love
bad
that.
rent. Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. So that's Gamay, obviously, and then and in Italy as well. You and I talk about this all the time. There are beloved, reds that are like nice and fresh, like Frappato,
Yeah,
or we were just talking about this before. In
yeah,
the north, in Alto Adige, you have Schiava. It's all these very, or another Sicilian actually is Nerello Mascalese. Just these
Masquerade,
nice
yeah.
light-bodied reds, which you could also drink in summer. Some of them can be chilled, right? Like Frappato and Schiava can be drunk a little bit cooler, so you can even have those, you know, kind of in warmer, seasons. And I was thinking, it actually reminds me of a thing that you had said also about rosés, right? Is this consumption of rosés, even, in places like Puglia with red meats and stuff. It's like a super common thing.
Yeah, I think that, some in Puglia in particular, their red wine it's a strong, I mean, their rosé is a stronger rosé. It's more
Yeah.
vibrant. It's definitely left on the skins, longer. But so I think that style definitely works. And we talked about this when we did Puglia. I just think that I've seen some producers there who are going to more of the lighter, pale pink, kind of salmony Provence, so south of France style, and
Style, yeah.
which we
It's so
love and
true.
everyone loves. But they should really stick to what they do traditionally because I think that they could have a moment. They could really
Yeah.
have a moment. So you mentioned Alto Adige. I find that so interesting because I'm talking to some people there about their whole shift to white wine, and that happened decades ago. And now, if they're known for white wine, everyone thinks
Yeah.
of them as the white wine people. Although they have these, Scava that you mentioned, and some of these red wines that are light as well. But the reason that they made this, they used to be a red wine region, and they made a total shift because they found that, first of all, white wines grow amazingly well there. It's just been, it's the terroir, but also the taste. They already noticed, a couple decades ago that tastes were shifting, and it was shifting away from kind of the bigger reds. I feel like part of this has to do with diets, we're not
Absolutely.
a meat and
Absolutely.
potato diet world as much as we used to be. Maybe like even in northern, I would say areas, not as much. People are eating a little bit less of that and going to like more of a lighter cuisine, which then just lends itself to a lighter wine.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Honestly, I can even say for myself, I've noticed a difference. So I'm definitely trying to eat less meat and, especially less kind of red meat and that kind of thing. And it just naturally, you gravitate then towards drinking less red wine. It's one of these things that it just, if you're having a piece of fish or something lighter, even just chicken breast or something like that, sort of on the grill or something like that. I mean, you'll go for either a light-bodied red, but more times than not, you'll go for white.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I am a little bit uh unwittingly ahead of the curve because I've never eaten a lot of meat. I'm not a big meat eater. And so I've always liked white wines and lighter wines myself. But for me, I was always looking at it like I love a nice red wine sometimes, but it has to be like if I'm in Piedmont and I'm having, like it's fall and there's like a truffle pasta or
Yeah.
there's something that you just, oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. But that's more of the outlier for me. I
Yeah.
do like the fresher kind of, I love, vegetables and lighter kind of things. So, I also think another thing that we can't ignore is that across the board, white wine is less expensive
Yeah,
than red wine.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
especially if you're going for high quality, there's a huge gap. It's hard to find, I would say, a white wine that would be more than even here, like more than 100 or 150, where you can get reds that are just outrageous. Oh,
Yeah,
and
it's
unless
true.
you're talking about champagne, I guess I have to make that caveat. But I do think that that is another reason why if, sales are down for whatever reason, sales are down, the tastes have changed, all the things we've said. Um, a lesser expensive, that's definitely a bonus too.
Absolutely. So it's really interesting because when you look at France as an example, I think this really epitomizes it. So if you look at somewhere like Bordeaux, you've got your higher end, extremely expensive reds, from your Saint-Emilion or your Grand Cru, and they're all still selling perfectly because it's that market, right? It's the middle right now. And it's actually, if I'm being honest, it's kind of the lower middle as well, where they just have such a huge surplus. They don't even know what to do with it. They're literally pulling these vines out of the ground um,
Talking about
because
red.
they don't
Yeah.
see any kind of the market kind of bouncing back. It really is like a definitive change, right? Whereas then you go to somewhere like Burgundy, and Burgundy, yeah, it's true, the Pinot Noir are incredibly expensive. But so are the Chardonnays, so is the Chablis of this world. Anything decent is really pretty expensive. So it's almost like you're seeing this, this increase in white wine prices because there's this shift from red wines. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as you said that, I thought, well, yeah, it's not even really, we could say white wine, but it's really light wine. Like we should
Yeah,
just really say it's light wine.
yeah, yeah,
Light
yeah. You're
wine
absolutely right.
um, is really basically coming out ahead for the moment. But as we've talked about before with trends, that does definitely doesn't mean anything. Cab is always going to be something that collectors are going to collect because it ages so well, and it has a great value. And then
Yeah,
I think that just like a lot of things have come and gone in their time, like Merlot was terrible. Nobody wanted to drink Merlot for a while.
true.
White Zinfandel, which is basically just Rosé, had its moment and then it was like verboten. And then you have, like even what was the other one that was here locally? Oh, the buttery Chardonnay. That was just a
Yeah.
style that
Oh,
was hot for
yeah.
some reason. Like when was it? The 80s or something. And then like nobody wants that anymore. Nobody
No,
wants that.
no,
So
no.
things change and things come back. Merlot
Yeah.
came back. White Zin is now rosé. Cabernet Sauvignon will come back at some point. I do believe, although it's always going to be there for certain people. So it's proved its worth over the centuries.
It's true. And I think there's actually one last thing. It's also about climate change and rising alcohol. Is that, this is really, you see people who are moving away from these like high alcohol wines that you're getting with more and more climate change, right? And
Yeah.
so you can get these, these wines that we were talking about in Sicily or in Alto Adige, they're like 12%, right? Like, I mean, cabs, it's hard to find something that's under 14. And it's
Yeah.
more towards kind of 15,
Oh yeah, no, it is hard. Yeah. It is hard. I mean, I know that there are also ways that you can reduce the alcohol, like you can de-alkalize things. That's a whole other topic we can talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could do it partially. That I don't know. I don't know enough about that area, but that's another topic for another time.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, definitely it's an interesting thing. And you're right, things come in and out of fashion, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with cab. And, also what is the next big, red grape going to be? I mean, Pinot Noir definitely had a moment. And I think I told you that was like, I heard this master of wine saying that the next big thing was going to be Sangiovese, just because they,
You did say that.
yeah, but
Yeah.
lots of people love Sangiovese.
But remember, Alberto Tasca said the next big thing was going to be Frappato.
That's true. He did. You're absolutely
And
right. I feel like
if I
everyone says
recall,
it's something.
if I recall, Lane Randolph said the same thing.
No, no, it's true. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So I need to get some frappato over here. Anyway, all right. Well, great. I think that that's like, listen, you guys, let us know what you think. Like, are there certain wines that you think are going to like start trending? Do you agree with
Yes,
this? Or do you agree with us
exactly.
with this trend? Or what do you think? Is cab dead? I guess that's the big question. Is cab dead, or will it always have a place?
Excellent question. Thanks very much, you guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.